Last week, we looked at chapter 2 of the book of Job. In this chapter, God permits Satan to hurt Job physically, but does not permit him to kill him. Today, we will continue with our study and look at the response of Job. Job chapter 3. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. He said, "May the day of my birth perish, and the night that said, a boy is conceived. That day, may it turn to darkness. May God above not care about it. May no light shine on it. May gloom and utter darkness claim it once more. May a cloud settle over it. May blackness overwhelm it. That night, may thick darkness seize it. May it not be included among the days of the year, nor be entered in any of the months. May that night be barren. May no shout of joy be heard in it. May those who curse days curse that day, those who are ready to rouse Leviathan. May its morning star become dark. May it wait for daylight in vain, and not see the first rays of dawn. For it did not shut the doors of the womb on me, to hide trouble from my eyes. Why did I not perish at birth, and die as I came from the womb? Why were there knees to receive me, and breasts that I might be nursed? For now I would be lying down in peace, I would be asleep and at rest, with kings and rulers of the earth, who build for themselves places now lying in ruins, with princes who had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Or why was I not hidden away in the ground like a stillborn child, like an infant who never saw the light of day? There the wicked cease from turmoil, and there the weary are at rest. Captives also enjoy their ease. They no longer hear the slave drivers shout. The small and the great are there, and the slaves are freed from their owners. Why is light given to those in misery, and life to the bitter of soul? To those who long for death that does not come, who search for it more than for hidden treasure, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave. Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? For sighing has become my daily food, my groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me, what I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness, I have no rest, but only turmoil. Job pours out his lamentation. He has no peace, no rest, no quietness, nothing but pain. Job wonders why God allows people to live in misery, and why he does not allow death to take them. Job has not sinned in all that he has said. He is expressing his anguish. He is wondering what the reason for his suffering is. Most people have wondered about suffering, and how can a loving God allow it? It is important to understand that God's creation of humans with free will did not only cause humans troubles, but God himself great pain. God did not abandon us in our pain. He allowed it because he could see what great joy it would bring in the future. Listen to what is said in the following place. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith, for the joy set before him he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. When facing hard times, it is important to fix our eyes on Jesus, to remember the pain he was willing to suffer for us. When we remember this, we can remember his love and trust that God will work all things out for the good of those who love him. Job was in such pain that he believed his pain outweighed the good in life. Job expresses his desire to be dead, but more than that, he says it would have been better for him to be dead at birth than to experience the suffering he experienced. Remember that Job was a righteous man in the eyes of God, but he was human, and he was not the only servant of God that felt this way. Jeremiah was beaten and persecuted by the people because he prophesied that Babylon would come and take them captives. After he was beaten by the officials of the temple, Jeremiah expressed himself to God as well. Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 7 to 9. You deceived me, Lord, and I was deceived. You overpowered me and prevailed. I am ridiculed all day long. Everyone mocks me. Whenever I speak, I cry out, proclaiming violence and destruction. So the word of the Lord has brought me insult and reproach all day long. But if I say I will not mention his word, or speak any more in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot. Jeremiah did not want to prophesy because his prophecies were all about violence and destruction. Because of the words of God, he was insulted and persecuted. But Jeremiah could not hold back the words that God gave him. After asking God to judge his persecutors, Jeremiah exclaimed, Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 14 to 18, Cursed be the day I was born. May the day my mother bore me not be blessed. Cursed be the man who brought my father the news, who made him very glad, saying, A child is born to you, a son. May that man be like the towns the Lord overthrew without pity. May he hear wailing in the morning, a battle cry at noon. For he did not kill me in the womb, with my mother as my grave, her womb enlarged forever. Why did I ever come out of the womb, to see trouble and sorrow, and to end my days in shame? Jeremiah also would have rather died at birth than face the pain he faced in life. If these two men of God could express these feelings openly, why would we not allow people to express their pain openly without blaming them for it? Both of these men continued to live righteous lives. God did not reprimand them for these lamentations. Many people face very serious problems and are full of grief and pain. When we face strong emotions like these, like the one of Job and Jeremiah, we should not think that it is wrong to express them to God. God is not scared of our emotions and does not want us to bottle them up inside of us and act like we are doing fine. Some people may think that expressing anger is wrong. Some people feel we should always act happy and content. If we are feeling anger, fear, hopelessness, and despair, we would be hypocrites if we tried to hide them from everyone. Job was not scared to express his feelings. The Bible is full of examples of people who were open about their pain with God. Expressing our pain to God is the proper way to deal with our feelings. Learning how to lament is a skill that all Christians should learn. Before we look into this, let us continue to look at Job's words. Job chapter 3, verse 20 to 22. Why is light given to those in misery, and life to the bitter of soul, to those who long for death that does not come, who search for it more than for hidden treasure, who are filled with gladness and rejoice when they reach the grave? The question that Job is asking is a fair question. There are answers to these questions, but we must realize that those answers were not what Job needed at the time. Job was expressing his feelings through these words. Unfortunately for Job, his friends tried to give him answers to the statements he was making, instead of just listening to his pain. In order to understand how we should react to people who are lamenting, let us look at a story in the Bible. John chapter 11, verse 17 to 37. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and he is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved them." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" In this story, we find Jesus purposefully waiting before he goes to see Lazarus because he knows that Lazarus will die. Jesus knew that God wanted to raise Lazarus from the grave and therefore bring honor to him. Jesus' response to Mary and Martha is very different, and we must conclude that he responded properly to both. Martha runs to Jesus when she hears that he is approaching, and in a way confronts him, saying that her brother would not have died if he had come earlier. Jesus then explains to her that he is the resurrection and the life, and that those who live by believing in him will never die. Jesus then asks her if she believes in this. Jesus' response to Mary is very different. Jesus called for Mary, and when she came to him, she also exclaimed, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled, and Jesus wept openly for his friend. Although Jesus knew that Lazarus would be raised from the dead in a few hours, he still understood the pain that his death had caused and joined into the grieving. We tend to think that godly people do not grieve, but this thinking is wrong. Godly people are the only people who grieve well. They do not hide or bury their feelings, but instead express them to the only one who can help, God. When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, before his crucifixion, he was in so much anguish that he sweat drops of blood. As Jesus poured out his anguish to God, God sent an angel for him to help him in his despair. Listen to David describe his grief. Psalm chapter 31, verse 9 to 10. "Be merciful to me, Lord, for I am in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief. My life is consumed by anguish, and my ears by groaning. My strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak." God is concerned about our pain and our suffering. God does not want us to act like everything is okay and bury our true emotions, but instead, he wants us to express these feelings to him so that he can help us with them. Not only does God want to help us with our feelings and pain, but he wants to help us deal with them, even if they are sinful. God showed great patience to the prophet Jonah and graciously helped him deal with his hatred towards the Ninevites. Listen to the following verses. Jonah chapter 4, verse 1 to 6. But to Jonah this seemed very wrong, and he became angry. He prayed to the Lord, "Isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? That is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live." But the Lord replied, "Is it right for you to be angry?" Jonah had gone out and sat down at the place east of the city. There he made himself a shelter, sat in its shade, and waited to see what would happen to the city. Then the Lord God provided a leafy plant and made it grow up over Jonah to give shade for his head, to ease his discomfort, or to ease his grief. And Jonah was very happy about the plant. Jonah was extremely angry with the people of Nineveh. The Ninevites were extremely wicked people, and Jonah had likely experienced their wickedness firsthand. When Jonah realized that God was going to forgive the people of the city, he was very angry towards God and asked God to take away his life. God was concerned about the grief that Jonah was feeling, and therefore he sent a leafy plant to ease his discomfort. God did not punish Jonah for the wrong feelings he had, but instead helped him deal with his anger and explained to him why he was willing to be gracious towards them. When we find ourselves in the presence of someone who is deeply hurt and in great pain, we should realize that they are not looking for answers, but for a friend. There may be a time later when we can help them answer some questions, but when someone is expressing their feelings to us, we must take the advice written to us in the following verse. Romans chapter 12, verse 15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. True love will not try to make someone who is mourning joyful, but instead, it will identify the feeling that is being shared and take part in it. Despite how we feel at the time, we must attempt to grieve with those who are grieving. This means that we should not argue the things they are saying or give them answers for the things they are saying, but instead just acknowledge the pain. Listen to the following verses. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14 to 16. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Jesus came to earth so that he could be touched by the feeling of our infirmities and therefore be able to empathize with our weaknesses. Listen to the following quote by Johnny Erickson. An orderly list of the 16 good biblical reasons as to why all this has happened, although those reasons might be good and right and true, that orderly, tidy, neat list of biblical directives sometimes can sting like salt in the wound. Rarely is suffering a matter for the mind. Most often, it's a heart issue. It's that deep, that painful, and when you hurt that bad, you don't stop the bleeding with answers. They will come later, but in an acute moment of pain, they can often come across as dry and mechanistic. Those who grieve do not need answers, but love and care. A lot of the book of Job records for us the answers that Job's friends give him to his lamentation. Listen to what Job has to say to them. Job chapter 13, verse 1 to 5. My eyes have seen all of this. My ears have heard and understood it. What you know, I also know. I am not inferior to you, but I desire to speak to the Almighty and to argue my case with God. You, however, smear me with lies. You are worthless physicians, all of you. If only you would be altogether silent, for you, that would be wisdom. Job chapter 16, verse 1 to 5. Then Job replied, I have heard many things like these. You are miserable comforters, all of you. Will your long-winded speeches never end? What ails you that you keep on arguing? I also could speak like you, if you were in my place. I could make fine speeches against you and shake my head at you. But my mouth would encourage you, comfort from my lips would bring you relief. Job knew all the things that his friends were saying to him. But his knowledge did not help him deal with his pain. Job was not looking for answers, but for compassion and comfort. There are several stages of grief. People who grieve will go through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally, acceptance. As Christians, we should seek to help people who are grieving express their feelings without fear of being judged. We should encourage them to be honest about their feelings with God. Those who turn to God with their anger, their fear, their doubts, pain, and their depression will be able to find help. Those who bury these feelings, or somehow act like they do not have them, will not find freedom. One of the first things that the priests of the temple had to do before they served God at the temple was wash their hands in a basin of water made out of polished bronze. This basin was made from mirrors. As the priest washed their hands, he could see himself as he was. He could see the dirt on his hands and face. Figuratively, the priest could look into the mirror and see his sins and acknowledge his sins. Before we can approach God or serve Him, we must acknowledge our sin. Expressing our fears, lack of faith, anger, and depression is not wrong. It is the first step to healing. The prophets of God were not scared to express their pain to God, as we saw in the book of Jeremiah. But listen to the following example. Psalm chapter 109, verse 6 to 13. Appoint someone evil to oppose my enemy. Let an accuser stand at his right hand. When he is tried, let him be found guilty, and may his prayers condemn them. May his days be few. May another take his place of leadership. May his children be fatherless and his wife a widow. May his children be wandering beggars. May they be driven from their ruined homes. May a creditor seize all he has. May strangers plunder the fruit of his labor. May no one extend kindness to him or take pity on his fatherless children. May his descendants be cut off, their names blotted out from the next generation. David expressed his feelings of anger to God. This helped him deal with his feelings, and he was able to find help from God and strength from Him. We know that David never punished King Saul for the way that he was treated, but instead treated him with kindness. David was able to do this through the power of God, but part of the process of healing was to express his feelings to God openly. Do not be scared to tell God how you truly feel. Learn to speak out in lamentations to God and look for His help. Do not attempt to silence someone who is pouring out their frustration, but encourage them to express themselves to God and find healing and strength from Him. May God bless you and your family.